Hello, gentle listener, and welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new, performed by voice artist Kristin Holland. Please join me, gentle listener, as we travel back through the dusty corridors of time to that distant primitive epoch, April 2019. In that month, we featured the story Mirror, Mirror by Raynaud. This mind-bending podcast within a podcast, within a podcast, elicited quite a response from you, our discerning listenership. On behalf of the quite brilliant RT and our humble production, thank you for your kind words. We are certainly glad that it tickled your fancy. If only there were another story from this wonderful writer we could share with you. Oh, hang on a moment. What's this? Nocturnal Transmissions is proud to present R.T. Raynaud's Missing, Presumed Dead. Flash blinds me, and a ringing fills my ears. I don't think I'm dead, but I'm pretty sure that's what's coming next. I just pray it's not agonizing. And it's quick. But it doesn't come. I'm still here. My senses come back slowly. Oh, what was that? It must have been a shell. I didn't even hear it coming. I don't feel any pain. I can't feel anything missing or hurt. I must have gotten lucky. I checked myself with my hands to make sure. I'm no longer on the duckboards. I've landed in the mud of a shell crater. The duckboards aren't anywhere in sight anymore. The shell must have taken them out and blown me clear. I stand myself up. The effort pushes my feet into the mud. My feet are totally submerged. I can't see any of the other men I was with. I have no idea where my rifle is, where my helmet is. The ringing in my ears won't stop. The shelling makes it worse. My head is throbbing. I discover my mate Thomas several meters away. He'd been right in front of me before the shell hit. Thomas and I are from Witness. We had signed up together a couple months ago, and they put us in the same regiment. We just finished our training when they sent us here, right outside a little town called Passchendaele. Before the war, this area had been wooded. Those trees have long since been splintered and uprooted. Weeks of rain have made this whole area a flat, muddy wasteland. Thomas is lying on his back in the mud. His legs are submerged. His eyes are closed. I don't know if he's alive or dead. I call his name. He doesn't respond, or at least I can't hear him, not over the shelling. I try to get to him. The mud won't allow me, holds me in place. I look closer. I see that Thomas's legs aren't submerged. They're missing. In fact, the bottom half of his torso is missing. I see his intestines peeking out from underneath his rib cage. The shell must have blown him in half. I give up trying to get to him. Thomas is slowly sinking into the mud. just like me. This mud has anchored my feet. Every time I try to move, it pulls me further down. There's nothing to grab onto. I try to pull my legs out with my hands, but it doesn't work. The mud is now up to my calves. I can feel the water seeping into my boots. Shells are flying overhead. I'm exposed. I need to find cover. I can't get my feet out of this mud. The vacuum is too strong. I get tired even trying to lift one foot out. The mud is up to my knees now. I need to relax. This is just like getting out of a bog back home. I have to calm down and work myself out when I hit bottom. I remember stories of people being swallowed up by bogs because they couldn't keep their wits. Relax. Lean back. I see if I can pry my legs out with my hips. It's no use. The strain is just getting me more stuck. Best not make any more sudden moves. I need someone to help me out. I call out to the wasteland. No one will be able to hear me over the shelling. I can't see anybody. With the shells still flying, people are probably staying as low as possible. I just hope somebody can come get me out. I start seeing nondescript silhouettes running around on the rim of the shell crater. They're not answering me. They could be Bosch for all I know. I'd settle for Bosch. Anyone who can get me out of here. The mud level is inching up my thigh. I still haven't hit anything solid. I keep calling. Finally, one of them answers me. I hear you, mate. I'm coming. The voice from the wasteland. It's familiar, though I'm having trouble putting a face to the voice. A man comes into view over the rim of the shell crater. Georgie. He is in my unit. Relief washes over me. Georgie, I'm sinking and can't get free. Help me out of here, I tell him. Hold on, I'm going to go find something to get you out of there, Georgie says, disappearing back into the wasteland. I can hear the shelling impacts move away. Bosch must be targeting down the line. That's good news, for us anyway. Mate, look what I found, I hear Georgie say, emerging from the wasteland. I can get to you with this. Georgie has found a section of duckboarding intact. He places it on the rim of the shell crater and tries to use it like a bridge over to me. It reaches to within a half-meter of me. Get me the hell out of here, Georgie! Hurry before the shells come back! It blurts out of my mouth involuntarily. It's clear Georgie needs more boards to reach me safely. What he's doing is fraught with danger, but I don't care. I just want to be out of here. Presented with the possibility of rescue, I can think of nothing else. Don't let me die in this muck, Georgie, I yell. I'm coming, hold on, Georgie says, cautiously walking out onto the duckboard. It presses into the mud but stays on top of the surface. He slowly inches down the boards. As he reaches me, he puts his hand out. I grab his hand and he starts to pull. I slowly emerge. The mud is back to knee level, but I still can't pull my legs out. Georgie is not as strong as he thinks. He needs to get closer. Georgie steps further out on the edge of the duckboard. I feel that my chance at escape is slipping away. I'm panicking at the thought of having to stay here. I pull harder to get my legs free. I can hear a sucking sound. The duckboard sinks slightly into the mud. The shift throws Georgie off balance. My weight pulls Georgie off the duckboard. He falls, face first, into the mud. I sink back down to where I was, and further still. Georgie is struggling. He's trying to get his face above the mud line. He pushes up with his hands. The effort only sends his hands deeper into the mud. He starts flailing. He fights against the sinking. Unsuccessfully. He's only pushing the surface mud downward, which draws him down with it. It's only making things worse. I yell to Georgie to stop. I tell Georgie that he needs to flip over onto his back. He doesn't comply. I don't think he can hear me. He's blowing scream bubbles in the mud. He's thrashing now. Georgie continues. Sinking. I reach for him. He landed a metre or two away from me. I'm struggling to get at him. It's making me sink further. I'm at my waist now. Georgie is slowly slipping away from reach. Georgie's tiring out. His thrashing is becoming slower and weaker. He's most certainly tired from his effort. That and the lack of air. The screaming has already stopped. Unless he's breathing mud, he's not breathing at all. I continue yelling at him. It's not going to be any good. His ears look like they're submerged in the muck. I don't think Georgie is going to make it. Georgie starts convulsing, like his body is rejecting what's happening to him. Maybe he actually started breathing mud. The thought of what that would do to my lungs washes over me with terror. After a moment or two, Georgie is no longer moving. I think he's dead. Georgie died trying to help me. He was a good guy, too good for his own sake, apparently. And I'm still here. I still haven't even touched bottom. The mud is a little above my waist. I'm realizing that a shell crater the size of this one may be 2-3 meters deep. I may never hit bottom. Well, not alive, anyway. My bowels release of their own accord. I don't much care that they do. The duckboard George had been using is just outside of my reach. If I could grab it, I probably wouldn't have the strength to pull myself out, but I might be able to stop myself from sinking any further. But I can't reach, and every attempt makes me slip farther away. I may as well be on the moon. I need to stop moving, lean back, increase my surface area to slow my descent, slow my breathing. I can no longer feel my feet. The pressure of the mud is cutting off circulation. My reason does me no good. Panic returns. I scream for help. I can't see anybody around. I'm screaming at nobody. I'm screaming at the wasteland. I have no sense of time, but it feels like I'm screaming for hours. The sun is starting to go down. It'll be dark soon. Even if someone could hear me screaming without duckboards leading to my spot, anybody trying to save me in the dark would be a damned fool. They'd most likely just find themselves stuck here with me. They'd end up dying because of me. Just like Georgie. None of this is helping me to stay afloat. The mud is now at the bottom of my rib cage. I stop screaming. I breathe heavy to regain my composure. I go back to slowing my descent. Stuck in the dark. Alone. Slowly sinking. Surrounded by the corpses of my comrades. Waiting to die. I get lightheaded. It's so quiet. The front is never like this. This is looking pretty grim, I say to the wasteland, just to hear a voice, if only my own. A voice suddenly yells back. You can say that again. The voice sounds familiar. It sounds like Georgie's voice. It came from Georgie's body, from a mouth submerged in mud. Very grim indeed. The voice continues. Georgie's corpse stirs. He pushes himself up from the mud and stands over me. He stares down at me for a moment, wiping the mud away from his face, and then sitting down cross-legged on the surface of the mud, as if it was completely solid. Absent the mud, I can now see Georgie's face. It is a twisted, horrified visage, frozen from his moment of death. His eyes are empty. My brain is finding it difficult to process what I'm seeing. Apparently, this is clear from my face. Why the look, chap? Don't you remember your old pal, Georgie? You remember? The guy you just murdered. You'd think after all that, you'd at least be cordial. The words are coming from Georgie, but it's not through his mouth. His mouth is not moving, like I'm just hearing his thoughts. His horrible face just stares at me. I don't have a mental response for what's happening. You're going to die, you know, Georgie tells me. You're going to slip below the surface and you're going to suffocate. Just like I did. You're not real, I say. It's the only thought I can express. Of course I'm not real. You just watched me die. You just caused it. Dead people don't come back. Dead people stay dead. No, I think it's clear you're losing your mind. Georgie's voice sounds affable, even playful. His face is still nightmarish. My wits are returning. Even if I'm talking to an impossibility that is telling me I'm going mad, I'm realizing that I have stopped sinking into the mud. You should have stayed back. You should have gotten help, is my response. I most certainly should have. I should have just ignored your screaming. But you also shouldn't have called for me. You should have warned me of how stuck you were. Danger invites rescue. You were too focused on getting out that you pulled me in. Do you know what happened to me just there? Georgie asks, gesturing to the spot in the mud where he'd been lying. You died, I responded. That's the brief way of putting it, I suppose. No, you pulled me in. I panicked. I sunk. And when I couldn't hold my breath any longer, I breathed in the mud and I choked. I have mud in my lungs right now. Do you know what mud in your lungs feels like? Georgie sounds like he's angry. His face doesn't move. As if on cue, mud drips from his open mouth. I can't respond. I'm both imagining what breathing in mud would feel like and trying desperately to clear my mind from any of this. My imagination is winning. Rest assured, my boy, it hurts. When you take that first breath, your body knows it's not going to survive. That's when the panic truly sets in, Georgie says. I look forward to watching you find that out firsthand. Stop. The word ekes out of me low. I close my eyes, trying to shut Georgie out. And to think your wife told you to join the Navy. The front was, what was the word she used? Oh yes, the front was a meat grinder. And what did you tell her? That the Germans are all fought out, that you would be careful, that Thomas would keep you safe? Georgie mockingly asks, while gesturing over to where Thomas is. Only Thomas's face and the top of his head remain above the surface now. That was pretty brilliant of you, Georgie continues. A lot of help Thomas was in keeping you safe, wasn't he? You know, Thomas isn't going to stay up top for much longer. Soon he'll be gone below the surface and out of existence forever. His family will stop getting his letters home, but they'll never be told why. When the generals figure out the losses for our regiment and who is no longer reporting for duty, his family might get a letter. But nobody will know where he went. He'll always be considered MPD. Missing. Presumed dead. Nobody will ever be able to recover his body. His family will have to bury an empty coffin. As will mine. Georgie waits a beat. As will yours. Georgie continues. Oh, and that wife, the smart lady you should have listened to. She'll collapse when she gets that letter. She'll collapse and she'll curse your name for being so stupid. Over time, though, any hope of your return will die. She'll remarry and she'll tell her new family of her late husband. MPD. While fighting in Belgium. You'll be a footnote in the history that she tells her children. Children that she'll have with someone else. There is a levity in Georgie's voice, though his face remains increasingly grotesque. The best thing she can do now is forget about you. I start weeping. He's not wrong. I let the tears run because I can't wipe them away without covering my face in mud. My fear slowly ebbs as it's displaced by regret. Why are you doing this? I ask. It's what you deserve for killing me, Georgie responds. I didn't kill you, I tell him. You're right, you just pulled me in. But I wouldn't have died if you hadn't been so selfish, Georgie rebuts. You made the choice to help me. I didn't ask to be here. This was just a tragic accident, I say with increasing anger. You didn't stop me. You knew that I would never have been able to pull you out, but you stayed silent. You too busy trying to save your own ass that you doomed mine, Georgie argues. I'm no longer considering what he's saying to me. Why didn't you see that you couldn't pull me out? Why did you keep trying when you knew you weren't strong enough? I ask. Georgie does not respond. I continue, my indignity rising with every word. All this was luck, bad luck. At any moment we could have been hit by a shell or a bullet. We were both lucky enough to avoid getting hit by the shell that killed Thomas. Thomas was lucky enough to die quickly. Maybe I'll be lucky enough to get out of here before the mud takes me. It's by God's grace alone that we survive out here. I didn't kill you. Circumstances did. Georgie tilts his head. I'm sensing that he would be mocking me if his face wasn't frozen in horror. He responds. You're not getting out of this mud. You're too far down for anybody to come get you. Anyone who tries will just end up like me, like you. You're in your grave already, and all you can possibly do is bring others with you. God took his grace back from you the moment he dropped you here. I'm crying. Then none of this matters. I'll be dead soon. You're just torturing a dead man with guilt and regret. For what? How does this benefit you? I'm stammering these words out. My chest is tightening and it's getting harder to breathe, like something is squeezing me. Misery loves company, Georgie states flatly. You're a monster, and you're wrong. I'll get out of this mud. I'll beat this, and I'll beat you. You can't beat me. I'm not real, remember? I'm just you, going mad. Then get out of my head! I wake. It is daylight out. I must have passed out. The hope that everything was just a nightmare briefly flashes in my mind. But the mud and the cold lets me know my situation hasn't changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. The mud is at my neckline. My outstretched arms must have slowed my descent while I was unconscious, but I've been sinking the whole time. I know now why I started having trouble breathing. Georgie is no longer sitting in front of me. That horrible face no longer in mine. Georgie is back, lying prone in the mud, as if he'd never gotten up to taunt me. Georgie has sunk considerably from where he had been. Thomas is no longer visible at all. I probably have a couple of hours left before my nose slips under. And then I have to breathe the mud, like Georgie. As he predicted. I hear voices off in the wasteland. I can't understand them. They're getting louder, but I still can't quite make out what they're saying. Frenzied hope courses through me. I scream, hoping to get somebody's attention, hoping for a miracle. I scream as loud as I can. The effort causes me to slip down. The mud is up to my chin. I can hear a voice on the other side of the shell crater. The voice is not speaking any language I understand. I realize it's German. Two men come into view. Bosch. They're young, maybe 20 years old. My countrymen must have retreated overnight. I'm behind enemy lines. They see me and begin hurriedly talking with each other. One of the Germans hands his rifle to the other and steps onto the duckboard. He starts slowly working his way down. He's trying to come get me. Georgie was absolutely right. Danger does invite rescue. I am way too deep for this guy to get me out by himself, or even the two of them. These men would need a team of people with a horse and rope to get me out safely. Georgie was right again. Most likely this guy is just going to wind up in here with me. Nobody else should suffer like this. I have to stop him. I reach back in my mind to the few German words I can remember from training. Nein! Achtung! The German on the duckboard stops and stares at me. The other German taps him on the arm, says something in German, and then points to Georgie lying face down in the mud. They speak briefly. Understanding visibly washes over the German on the duckboard. It is too dangerous to come get me. He retreats. Both stare at me, concerned, speaking to one another in hushed tones. The Germans pick up the duckboard and together lay it further out to within grabbing distance of me. I grab it, but I've sunk so far that I don't know if I even have the leverage to keep my head from sinking under the mud. Even if I could, cannot help but wonder how long I could keep myself up. How long would I have to wait for these Germans to bring help? Would they even be able to find it? Even if they found others who could help, would they be able to convince them to help me, an enemy combatant? Chances are, all this duckboard can do for me now is delay the inevitable. Watching how I grip onto the duckboard, the Germans appear to understand this as well. I reach for my ID tag and pull it off. I throw it towards the Germans as it lands by their feet. They look down at it, and then back at me. "Für mein Frau," I say. The German who has been on the duckboard squats down and picks it up. He holds it in his hand, looks at it, and then back at me. He looks helpless. "Herr Liegen, bitte," I say. The face of the German who's been on the duckboard changes from helpless to horrified. I'm wondering whether I said the words right. "Ja," the other German says, and he nods. He unshoulders his rifle and points it at me. The German who had been on the duckboard briefly protests his friend's action. The other German sharply responds to the protest, silencing it. "Danke," I say. I close my eyes. I don't hear the report, but I feel the impact. My ears ring. The pain is excruciating. It instantly drowns out the feeling of the mud around me and leaves me floating. Explosions of light erupt in front of my eyelids, but one by one, they burn out. The pain begins to subside until there is nothing left. "You're wrong here, Georgie. I am escaping the mud, after all. I guess I am the lucky one." Missing, Presumed Dead by R.T. Raynaud. As part of his preparation for this particular performance, our humble narrator viewed Peter Jackson's recently released film, They Shall Not Grow Old. We simply cannot recommend this extraordinary documentary highly enough. Seek it out. I hasten to add, this is not a paid advertisement, but rather a recommendation from us to you for your enjoyment and edification, gentle listener. Now, if you're a wonderful writer with something extraordinary to say and would like to be featured on the podcast, please jump on the website nocturnaltransmissions.com.au and pop into our contact section. We frequently receive stories in this manner and have featured many of these offerings on the podcast. Don't keep your light under a bushel. Now, a big hello to our latest Patreon acolytes. Louis Moussoon, hello and welcome. Lloyd Bass, hello and welcome. L.C., hello, welcome. And Thomas Wilson, hello Thomas, welcome. If you would like to become an official acolyte, cohort, or minion of Nocturnal Transmissions, just visit patreon.com and search for us by name. This episode was brought to you with the generous assistance of our cohorts, Michael Wood, Robert Troy Peterson, Evan Dewley, Sam Bell, and Sanitarium magazine. Sanitarium is an independent magazine dedicated to bringing audiences the best in horror from around the globe, available from Amazon and sanitariumpublishing.com. All non-public domain stories are featured with the permission of the authors. All voices and production are concocted by Kristin Holland. Good night, gentle listener, and as always, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone. Especially yourself.